Welcome back to my channel. I am Lamborghini C, and I am here to share a little bit more about my travels. So those who have been following my social media pages, you've seen some highlights of my trip to Colombia, which was an awesome experience. So I went to Cartagena, Colombia, and it was just wonderful. I met some wonderful, beautiful people. Those who follow me from a business perspective, you know that I actually have contractors that work for me from Colombia. Most of them are in other areas. They aren't in Cartagena. So unfortunately, I did not get to meet up with them this trip, but I will be back soon, and we'll be able to, have an Edmond Enterprises get together. So I'm so excited about that. Now, I booked the trip to Cartagena in about 2 weeks time frame. I was wrapping up a huge project and needed to get away, and I knew I'd be able to have the team help manage some of the other projects and clients that we had ongoing at the time. And so I booked the trip, packed my bags, and in 2 weeks I was in Cartagena, Colombia, and it was wonderful. I was able to stay on the beach. Now, the way that people have described Colombia to me, the different areas, is they have kind of coined Cartagena as like the Miami of Colombia, especially in the Boca Grande area, which is where I stayed. And they've described Bogota as kind of the DC, if we were to relate it to a U.S. city. And they've described Medellin as kind of the New York, okay? And to just give you guys a little bit of a feel. Now, it's interesting because I've seen different artwork from my engagement, like with my contractors and things. Like I would see different art pieces on their walls, like when we're meeting virtually. And I would see like individuals or pictures of people that kind of look like me, like my complexion. And initially it was odd to me, like I didn't understand, kind of the history. Now, after I booked the trip and I started to look for excursions or things that I wanted to partake in, I learned a lot more around the history of Colombia and Cartagena in general, like more specifically. So I learned that Colombia and Cartagena, that area, was the largest slave port for South America. And so that's why it's such a blend and a mix of people with African culture and African ancestry that resides there. And even deeper, I learned that there's a town called Palenque that is in Cartagena. It's about a 30-45 minute drive right from Gethsemane, from the old city area. And the whole town is filled with people that look like my cousins and aunties. And so I had the pleasure of spending a day there. And so I have some footage that I took on my travels there that I'm going to share with you all. But before we get into that, I just want to share with you a little bit of history around Palenque. Well, in the early 1600s, a group of enslaved Africans led by Benkos Bioho, which you will see statues of him, like in Cartagena and definitely in Palenque. They escaped from their Spanish captors in Cartagena and fled into the hills. After resisting many attempts to be recaptured, they were finally granted independence in 1713, making Palenque the first free African town in the Americas. And when I tell you there's such rich culture there, it's amazing. I will tell you the area, it's not as modernized, and you can tell that there is a need for for an increase in economics in the area. So I want to implore to you and encourage you, if you do have the pleasure to visit the great country and city of Cartagena, to take some time and visit Palenque. Many of the tour companies and tour guides that do the tours through Palenque, a lot of them have relationships with the people there, and so some of them you will find, like my particular tour guide, that actually a portion of the proceeds that they make from conducting these tours, they make sure that they reinvest into the city. So I encourage you and I implore to you, please, when you do go visit, as you're taking in all of the culture and the beaches and just the wonderfulness of Cartagena, take a day and go check out Palenque. But for me, it was awesome. It was as I sat there and listened to the stories and the history, I further knew why I needed to be there. Like, it was divine for me to go visit Cartagena. It made sense, since I was employing people that live in the area, in that country. And I've had a few people in the past that have lived in Cartagena that have worked for admin enterprises. But again, the resilience of the people there, and the story of Bancos. So he actually was an African prince who was captured by the Spaniards and brought to Cartagena, who was captured. And again, you if you followed me, you've always heard me talk about, like one of my favorite quotes from Nipsey Hussle, where he talks about it's not on you, it's in you. And what's in you, they can't take away. And that holds so true through the test of times. And again, even with Bancos, he was an African prince and he knew who he was. That's why it's so important. And many of you will find that's why you are fought so often around who you are and whose you are. Especially if you are a child of God. More than ever, in 2024, your focus needs to be around knowing and understanding and growing in who you are, and making sure that it's in you, that your goals and your morals are in you, that others can't change them, that other people with their nonsense can't sway your morals or get you to go along with their nonsense because they have, crazy drama and things going on, and because maybe you like them as a person, you accept their ills. I'm about to go on a tangent here. Because you like them as a person, or because maybe they have had some positive effects in your life, that you then begin to excuse some of their moral ills, right? I remember many of you will know, who were part of a community that I was a part of. I'm about to talk about it. And I had to tell the individual, we have different standards of integrity. And when I tell you that, if that hasn't shown itself true, baby, because I know who I am and I know whose I am and I know what's in me. See, the game is going to test you, never fold. Stand 10 toes down. And remember, it's not on you and it's in you. And what's in you, they can't take away. Because some people will try to have you go with anything. As the wind flows and blows, they'll have you just swaying in the wind, and before you realize it, you will look up and you will wonder, who am I? And so you can't let people come in and just, again, like sway you and change you from your own morals and values that are in you. And so back to Bancos. See, they captured Bancos. But Bancos was, and see, I didn't even know I was going to go here, but let's go. They captured Bancos in Africa, this African prince. They didn't know who he was, but he knew who he was. And so because it was in him, his innate abilities, kicked in. They also captured people from his village as well as some of the neighboring villages. But because he was a prince, he knew, this ain't for me. I'm not supposed to be a slave. So he knew that's not in him. He also knew, since he was a prince, that he had an innate responsibility to free his people. And so he took it upon himself to fight. And he wasn't successful at the first try. He wasn't successful at the second try. So he had to keep at it, right? And eventually he was able to lead his people to freedom. And so if that's not something that we can't learn from, I don't know what is. Because again, imagine if he had just shrunk and just decided to just say, you know what? I got captured. I'm in this situation. I'm just here. Can you imagine if that's the mindset and the thought process that he would have taken on? But no, because of what was in him, and he knew that he knew, I am a prince and I need to free my people. It's my responsibility. He freed his people. Now, I remember sitting at the table, an area we were sharing some bread. And as they were, kind of going through some of the history, thank God I had my shades on, because I started to get a little bit emotional. Now, I remember my eyes kind of beginning to tear up as they began to share with us about, the people and how they began to become so creative on their quest for freedom that they, the women were able to work in the house, because there were some of them that were cleaning the houses. And so as they would clean the dens and the studies in the houses, they had access to the maps of the waterways. Now, back then, there were no cell phones like we have today. So there was no spy equipment like we have today. So, of course, they had this access. They weren't able to capture photos and things, right? So they had to memorize. So they would make sure that when they went into those houses, they would clean like those dens and study areas so that they could have access to those maps, and they would memorize the waterways. And so that they would further memorize them and not forget, they would go back and they would begin to braid the patterns in each other's hair. Now, it just looked like a whole bunch of zigzags and crazy designs, right? And the slave owners, they didn't know. They were mapping out their way. They were documenting. See, that was their photographic memory and their way of documenting the waterways so that they could devise their passage of escape. And I got so emotional, and I'm getting emotional now, because as a black woman in America, what this country has done to us, especially around our hair, and it dawned on me, that's why they give us such hell about our hair. And there's such angst and such a discussion around when we decide to wear our hair natural, when we decide to, have a little bit of jazziness with our hairstyles and the different patterns. And, many of us in my age group, we can look back over the years with an Allen Iverson and the hell they gave that man with his hair, because he chose to wear his cornrows. And see, he would have designs throughout his hair, right? See, a lot of this stuff is deeper than the surface that we know of. And when you begin to know and understand what's behind the scenes of some of this stuff, it not only opens your eyes, but it gives you a different vantage point. And I thought, wow, how intelligent and how genius was that for them to even have the mindset to do such a thing, right? And that was just one of the instances or examples of the resiliency, right? And then even when I look at the people of today, that are still in the town. The resiliency that's there, the traditions across generations, and the way in which they've been able to maintain their culture and pass it down from generation to generation to generation. It's amazing. It is truly, truly amazing. And so I can't say enough to you. If you get the wonderful opportunity to visit Cartagena, Colombia, take a moment, a day, and go on one of those tours so that you too can experience and get to meet the wonderful, wonderful people of Palenque. I'm going to share my experience. I hope you enjoy. Bye.
Y todo era Palenque, mamonacito Palenque. Y todo era Palenque, mamonacito Palenque.